Unlike other programming languages where arrays needed to have the same data type for all the items within its collection, in Python, sequences can be homogeneous or heterogeneous, meaning that they can contain all items of the same data type or they can freely mix between different data types. So you could have one list that has an item that is a string, another that is a number or an integer or a float or a boolean, or it can even contain other lists and tuples. Knowing that, let's go ahead and practice creating some lists and tuples. So here I have a list of numbers and they can contain different numbers here. And if I go ahead and print that, looks like I missed the bracket. And let's also, just for the sake of practice, let's go ahead and print out the type of this variable. We get back the values of this list, and we also get back that the type is a class of type list. Let's go ahead and create another one. Let's say I have a record. This record has multiple items. The first one is a name. The second maybe is an age. So it's a number. And then we could have a Boolean value indicating whether they are a student or an active student or not. So in this case, let's say false. Or you could have a float value that indicates their GPA. So let's say 3.9. If I go ahead and print that record, also let's go ahead and print the type of that record, we get this expected out. So you can see that we can create lists that are homogeneous or heterogeneous containing different data types. We could also create empty lists, which are ready to be filled later on. So this is basically how you create an empty list. Now, tuples are very similar to lists. However, as we've mentioned before, they are immutable, as in you cannot change them, you cannot modify them, you cannot replace their items, and so on and so forth. So let me go ahead and create a few examples here. Let's say I have a variable for coordinates. So here is some coordinates for, I don't know, not even sure if this is a real coordinate or not. But if I go ahead and print those coordinates, and we can also print out the type of this, we should get back that this is of type tuple, and here is the output of our tuple. You could also create tuples without the parentheses. So as long as you have a comma separated list of items, these are considered as tuples. So here's another example. And if I do 1, 2, 3, 4 or 1, 2, 3, 4, and then here's a comma, and here we can have a string, and we can have a Boolean value, so on and so forth. If I go ahead and print out this variable, and we also try to print out the type of that, the output got automatically wrapped in this parentheses. This is what we call packing. So when you list out the items without parentheses around them, in Python we call that packing. So you can pack a tuple with values without the need for the parentheses. Now, lists and tuples, they share common behaviors. So some of these behaviors relate to how you can access or find out the number of items that you have within a list or a tuple. So to do that, we can do print len, and then we provide the name of the list or the tuple that we want to find the length of. So here I could do record. We could also do the another example here. So len, another example. If I print this out, both of these functions will work on lists and tuples. Lists and tuples also share the same behavior when it comes to accessing elements by their entities. So here I have a list of letters, and if I wanted to access the first item or the first element in that list, we would do letters and then the index 0. All sequences in Python are 0 indexed, meaning that they start with the number 0. That is the first address in any sequence that you have in Python. So to access the third element, that would be letters at the index 2. What might be new here is that you could also use negative indices to access elements from the end. So over here, if I wanted to get the last element, I could do letters, add the index of the length of letters, -1, or I could just do get me the letters at the index of -1. So give me the last item. If I wanted to get the second to last item, I could do letters at -2. So second to last item. So the second item from the end. Let me take this out in a separate cell just so I can execute that first cell here. So if I do that, here we get the first was A, the third was C. We did the last twice, so once with the lengthier way of trying to access the last element in an array, and obviously the shorthand one, or the one where we would use the negative indices to find items from the end. We could do -1, and the second to last here was the letter D. Similarly in tuples, let me actually go ahead and just copy this entire print, and let me replace this one over here. Really, the only difference between what we ran already and this tuples example is that we're just going to be changing all those variable names into pair. And if I run this cell, I should get exactly the same result that I'm expecting. So the first one here was 97, the third was 99, the last, we've done it twice, it was 100, and the second to last, or the -2 index, would be the 99. Now, we've mentioned earlier the mutability of lists and sequences. I'm going to go ahead and create a list of numbers. Here's 33, 66, 99. Let me actually make sure that I switch this from a markdown cell to a Python cell. That way it would be executable. And if I wanted to change the second item, I could do nums and number 1, I want this to be 44 instead. And if I print out this list, I should get those updated values. I could also add items to this list. So I could do nums.append, and let's say I want to add the number 55. If I go ahead and print nums after that, we get 33, 44, 99, and these are the values that we've had. And then we also get the added value of 55. However, if we were to try to do the same thing with tuples, so let's say I have a tuple test, and here I have 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and I try to modify tuple test at the index 1. If I wanted to change that to 0, 0, 0 and hit enter, we will get this error that basically says there's a type error. Tuples are not mutable and they do not support item assignment. Similarly, if I try to do the same thing, and instead of trying to reassign it like that, what if I try to use the append function? If I do .append, you notice that there is not even a function called append. So if I try to add an item here, 55, and execute this cell, we get the same error. There is no attribute called append on an object of type tuple. Now, don't confuse reassignment with mutability. What I mean by that is, let's say I have this tuple test. I could actually reassign that variable name to something else completely. So here's 999, and here's 888. And if I go ahead and print that, we get those updated values. But what happened here is that we reassigned this variable name to a completely different value. So what happened here is that we did not mutate this original value of this tuple. What we did is that we completely reassigned it to a whole new object or a whole new value. So lists, they can grow, they can shrink, they can change items. Tuples cannot. And that's why lists are great for things that you want to be able to modify. However, tuples are great for things that are constant and for fixed values.